Welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I'm your host, Tim Keller. Along with me is Mr. Matt Disher in his new digs today. He's having his office redone, so he's in a different location in his room. So if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, you'll see that there's a new background there. Looks fun. And we have a fun guest today. We have Mr. Gary Steensgard with us today. He's joining us, HR representative. So, everybody likes HR. It's going to be good to talk to him.
Absolutely.
Matt, how are you doing, sir? I know you guys just had another weather event in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean the weather event here is the most snow we've had still in 2 or 3 years. But we're in the north, so we're prepared for it to a point. We're in this weird place in Cincinnati. We're in this weird place where people panic and act like it's the end of the world or the apocalypse when the snow is coming around. And they go to the grocery store, so that we had lines coming out of the grocery store pickup, like the click lists and the things like that, where you order and they come drop it off in your car. Lines out into the parking lots on a local level because they said we were getting all this snow. And I made the observation that even despite past blizzards and major snowstorms, nobody in this city, in this area, has ever really been snowed in for any more than about a day. So this is not like what's happening in Dallas right now, or in Texas, across Texas. Power is out. People are without heat and electricity, and the roads are impassable and stuff like that. And those people are literally snowed in, like they can't go anywhere. And that's just largely because their infrastructure does not support. They're just not prepared. It's like if it snowed in Miami, Florida, they wouldn't know what to do. But we're in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we have winter weather here. And people act like it's almost like, I've said this before, people need some drama. Like they're really bored, so they need the drama. So whenever the snowstorm comes around, they act like the world is coming to an end. So we didn't get the 15 inches they promised. We got we probably got 8 or 9 inches on the ground right now. We got a little bit of ice, but school got called off yesterday. Everybody's at school today, so it's business as usual. What about you? Did you get hit?
No, ours. The big one's supposed to come tomorrow. We had a little bit of ice and rain the night before last, but nothing like we saw down in Texas. Matt, you brought up that the Texas infrastructure is not built for this. They don't get this on a regular basis. So I remember my first winter down in Lejeune, they got a dusting. I mean, it was that snow where you could just literally take a broom outside and broom off the sidewalk, broom off your steps. Entire base shut down. Jacksonville, North Carolina, shut down. I'm like, what? This isn't even snow, people. Like, what's going on? But they just aren't used to having that. If it does fall, it doesn't normally stick and lay anywhere. So the fact that there was this white substance falling from the sky and actually sticking to the roadways just completely shut the entire place down, and I was kind of blown away.
You remember a few years ago in Atlanta? I mean, the pictures were the apocalypse. I mean, there were school buses on fire on the side of the highway, and it's not funny for the people that are involved in it, but it's in retrospect, it's funny. It's funny that the difference of not the situation, the difference of preparedness. That a little bit of ice cripples these cities. It crippled that city. And the photos that were taken looked like The Walking Dead. I mean, it was that bad. It was
just the local highway maintenance people don't have the salt and the pre-treat, for the highways and the roads and things like that. So when it does start to happen, it gets way out of hand. I know growing up, I spent 5 years living in Kenai, Alaska. I don't remember missing one day of school because they just had the equipment and they knew what to do. Hey, we deal with this every year. Here comes the snow. We're going to push a bunch of it with these massive pieces of equipment, and everybody's going to get to school and get to work just fine. So, but Gary, you're down in Tennessee, right?
I am. The mountains, East Tennessee.
Okay. How's the weather down there right now?
Fantastic. I think since the area is so driven by tourism, the big places like Dollywood and Gatlinburg, they really kind of demand that the DOT gets out there and clears the roads relatively quickly because people are still coming here regardless of the weather. They don't care. So they get the roads cleared really well. And the mountains kind of protect us from the big, really, 12 inches or more snow. But we got like 1.5 inches yesterday. The biggest thing I have to worry about is if I have an employee that lives on a mountainside and can't get down their driveway to get to work. But Gary, I can't get to work. And I'm like, absolutely, stay home, be safe. It's just work. It's not a big deal.
Now, when that happens, do you send out the reply all emails to the entire team and say, "Hey, Bob can't get to work today"?
No, but I'm going to start, and I'll show you.
Publicly shame them. No.
we were talking before we went live. We were talking about how people will reply all or send messages to like literally everybody through companies. And it's like, "Hey, what happened to Bob today? Or, where's Bob? He didn't show up for work." And like 400 people get it, and then the reply all start and go for 3 hours until somebody figures out where Bob went.
Yeah, those are my favorites. When it's supposed to be a local issue, and instead of sending it to local leadership, they send it to the entire nationwide corporate leadership email address. And so you're getting emails about someone that didn't show up to work in Phoenix, Arizona, and then you got people in Wyoming and Florida and Kansas all replying, I haven't seen Bob. He hasn't been here in days. As a matter of fact, we probably need to address his attendance because he's not been here in weeks. So
then I get the one-off email from somebody at corporate saying, "Why is your team emailing us about Bob?"
Yes.
And then I have to answer to it. Well, I got to work on their etiquette. So
my answer would be, "What about Bob?"
Yeah, exactly.
Hey.
I missed that email.
So, like we normally like to do, we like to start with some news. I found what normally we go to military.com. I found one on Al Jazeera.com, as a matter of fact.
I like that.
The U.S.-Japan agreement has been extended for a year to keep the military bases there in Japan. I actually was not aware that Japan and places like Germany, they actually pay us in order to keep our troops stationed there. It helps with covering the cost of housing and food and logistics, getting products and materials over to those bases. The U.S. currently has about 55,000 troops stationed in Japan. Under the last presidency, the president was pressuring the Japanese government to quadruple the price of keeping the troops there. It seems like the current White House regime has decided they're gonna keep the price where it had been for a while now. So they've extended that for 1 year. It does sound like an agreement is close to being signed by both parties to extend this deal even further than that. So I honestly, Matt, you and I both served in Japan. I can't imagine the U.S. military not having those installations there. They'd have to find a home in the Pacific somewhere.
It's been such a point of contention because I know that like there were protesters, not as many back then when we were there, when we were in Okinawa, but ever since there have been protesters saying we want you off the island, and they want us out of these places. And there's a certain level of economic support that the American bases obviously probably provide, local economy, local infrastructure, et cetera. That's a lot of dollars. I read something yesterday, and I'll have to look it up. I'll have to figure out where this was, but it talked about how a lot of these countries benefit from having U.S. bases on their property. And it's bad for the United States because we have this massive military budget that we have to support, and these other countries don't. They actually save money by having the protection of the United States nearby. And I don't know if that's a political discussion, something that goes down that path of, is this really political? But if you think about it, some of these countries probably can slim back on their Department of Defense budgets, because if anything happens to them, we're going to go fight that battle. So yeah, the locals are probably like, hey, we don't want, in our case, the Marines out in town, stumbling down the street, breaking beer bottles in the street.
Yeah.
Of course we were a bunch of jerks sometimes. Not we, the royal we, the us.
Yes.
I don't think I ever did any of that kind of stuff. I went out and had a good time like anybody else did, but I was never a bad actor. But there were bad actors. There still are bad actors. There are the dare I call them the idiots who go out and make us all look bad. So, it's politics versus the local population, I think.
It is, and I think it's a balance strategically. We have to be there right now. Think about the South China Sea, everything going on with Hong Kong, new administration. We don't know how that's going to go. And it's really, like you said, it could be political, but the flip side of that is if we pull out, then they get to build up their own military again.
Right.
So I think it's a pros and cons, Ben Franklin close kind of thing. What's the best thing to do here? And unfortunately, I never got to serve in Japan. So it's on my bucket list, and I'd really like to go there. My dad served in the Army Air Force, Army Air Corps and then the Air Force way back when, and had nothing but great things to say about it. And this was immediately post World War II. So I've always had that kind of desire to go there and check it out. So
yeah. I know that, Matt, you talk about, the bad actors and stuff. There are plenty of those. But then you also have, individuals like yourself. I know you, for instance, while you were in Japan, you did a lot of the scuba diving,
Yeah.
So there's people out there that are taking advantage of a place they'll possibly never go again in their lives. And they're going around and they're seeing things and being more touristy than, a drag on everything.
Right.
But you got plenty of PFC smuckatellis out there just walking around throwing cash at everything.
Right. And the bad actors are rare, statistically rare. Like most of us, and I always say this about the military versus going to college. I've read before, again, and this is all anecdotal, but I've read before that statistically you're safer to go in the military as an 18, 19-year-old guy in America than to go to college. Statistically, there are more accidents and bad happenings and people getting hurt and car accidents and things like that in college than there are people going to the armed forces. And I say that because had I wanted to go out and do something stupid, my libo buddy, as we called them, like if Tim and I went out on the town in Okinawa and I decided to act like an idiot, Tim's going to make sure he's going to drag me back to the barracks. And, if I cause problems, Tim's in trouble too. Mm-hmm. And so, on a number of occasions, I'd be out and I broke up a fight in a bar one time. I accidentally hurt one of the guys. I didn't accidentally hurt him. He wouldn't stop fighting. And so I had to put him down on the ground a little bit. But this was back when I was a young stud. But it was one of those things like we're holding each other accountable. And I'm sitting in a club listening to a band, having a beer, and these guys are going to start fighting with each other. And I think they were Air Force, and there was a table full of Marines there, so naturally it went down. Sorry, Air Force, but it was it was the accountability level. There were so many of us there that if one person was acting up, the rest of us would make sure that person would kind of get in line. But you can't be everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
So there's going to be the stupid guys that go out and make trouble.
Yeah. I know personally, one night I was, end of the night, I was at a yakitori stand there on the side of the road, getting myself some meat on a stick, and
mystery meat.
The young lady I was hanging out with that evening saw a big potted plant on the side of the road. She goes, "I really like that plant." And so I looked at the yakitori guy. "Is that your plant?" And he goes, "No." I goes, "Can I have it?" And he goes, "Yes." So I picked the plant up and we put it in the cab and went back to the barracks. That's about the dumbest thing I ever did overseas. But hey, she got her plant. She was happy.
Right. There you go.
Somebody woke up in the morning and their plant was gone.
So, the next article I have is the U.S. Air Force, the 495th Fighter Squadron, has a UK-based F-35 fighter squadron that was now crowdsourced a new name. I bring this up because the name's pretty cool. They got named the Valkyries. If you don't know, that is the Norse fighting group of women from Norse lore. But I will say that the Air Force, praise to them. They could have got some really odd names. I'm sure there were some odd submissions to this, but it would have been weird if they got, the Air Force Yeet Squadron or something like that.
One of these modern words that doesn't make any sense that came from like video games.
Yeah. Something.
I sound like my dad. I sound like an old, like I'm old. Like, yeah. Yeah, it was. What are these words these kids are using? Nobody knows what you're talking about.
Well, there are words that my teenage children and some of the younger men I work with say, and I'm like, what is that? And I have to get brought up, and it's sad. It's sad, but yes, we are now getting to that age.
Right. Yeah. So I like Valkyries. I think that sounds cool.
Yes.
There's a reference to a movie there, the Valkyrie. It's the one with Tom Cruise where they try to assassinate Adolf Hitler, which is a true story too. And I think that was Operation Valkyrie. I forget it's translated from something German, Wulker or something like that, but same word, same meaning. I think that's a good name. I like it. I'm down.
Norse mythology for choosers of the slain, those who decide who live and die in battle.
That's accurate, man. Yeah. I wish I would have thought about that as like a call sign. I wish I could go back to my military days when I had like a radio call sign and I would have come up with something crafty because my call signs were not good. And then I'd like later on, I watch these YouTube videos of like these dudes rolling into combat and like Fallujah, and they're on the radios like Spartan 2, this is Valkyrie 5, and I'm like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh man,
those are
my
some
call sign of
amazing-
tin can doesn't really hold up.
Don't make fun of tin cans.
Yeah.
Yeah, no longer are sporty socks doesn't sound so cool
Yes,
anymore.
Hey there, Mickey Mouse. How you doing?
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. So I thought that was I thought it was a good name for the squadron, but I would like to see, some of the submissions to this, because I'm sure there were some fun ones in there.
Right. 100%.
I know every time like a smaller city is getting like a minor league baseball team or something, and they'll put something in the local paper. Hey, help name the team, and then you get one of these submissions. They'll have 50 submissions that they'll put up for, hey, go ahead and pick your favorite, and all of a sudden there's one that's like in third place that you're like, oh god, we can't have it end up being, the York, I don't know, bucket lovers or something. Yeah, it's
right.
like, what is this about?
That reminds me of the Family Guy episode where Peter went to play for the New England Patriots, and then it turns out that he was really terrible. So they transferred him to the London Silly Nannies.
Yeah.
They were like a dancing team or something.
Yeah. So it's a fun show though. But
I've got another article here.
Go ahead.
Meet the man who puts movie stars through boot camp. And
I read that one this morning. It was a long transcript, but
yep.
Yes.
So Captain Dale Dye, this is how you know, for the most part, if you're going to watch a military movie and the military movie is going to be good, is if Captain Dale Dye is either in it or he's the military advisor. Mm-hmm. So when you watch, for those of us who served in the military, whether you were in combat or not, you watch some of these movies and you're like, this is highly unrealistic. I'll give you an example. Like the military execution of Transformers, like the radio chatter and the nonsense that's happening. It's highly unrealistic, Michael Bay stuff. Lots of flashy, big explosions, and everybody's really close to it. Whereas like Dale Dye was the military advisor, and he was one of the, not a co-star, but he was another character in Saving Private Ryan, which is, in my opinion, in the top 2 or 3 of finest war movies made ever. So Dale Dye, Platoon. There are a number of, I don't have the list in front of me, but he worked on Band of Brothers. If you've seen Band of Brothers, which was, again, it's when I look at it, I'm like, it's done in the same style as Saving Private Ryan, that unsaturated, raw, grainy footage. But you got to get war movies right, especially if you're telling them for accuracy. You want to tell the story. You want it to look and feel as it should look and feel. And some movies are just not done well. And I've always credited Dale Dye. He's a retired Marine captain. Always credit him on sending these guys through boot camp and essentially making the movie look and feel as realistic as it can. But to that point, he sent the cast of Saving Private Ryan through boot camp, which did not include Matt Damon. So Matt Damon, if you remember in that movie, Matt Damon is Private Ryan, and they're rescuing him, and they all have a little bit of animosity to him because by the time they get to him, they've lost a couple of guys in combat. And the animosity was real, and they did that on purpose. They didn't put Matt Damon through the boot camp so that when the rest of the cast and crew would show up for the movie, and they've been doing weeks of this like grueling training prior to starting the movie, and they're tired and they're worn out, Matt Damon just shows up, and they hated him in real life and they hated him in the movie. So it's kind of interesting. There was a strategy there that I've read about, but you can go on YouTube and watch behind the scenes of Saving Private Ryan. It's some pretty interesting stuff. What they did to try to get it right. And another thing about that movie is they used a number of amputees, like real amputees in real life, as extras when people were getting hurt on the beach scenes and things like that. So it's pretty interesting. They went to great lengths to make it real.
I will say, the Hollywood movie, let's just use Rambo for an example. The Rambo explosion, the big fireballs, the big booms. I get it. That is for Hollywood. That is for, the moviegoers. Then you have things like Saving Private Ryan, the beach scene. When something blows on the beach, you just have a bunch of sand and dust and dirt flying up in the air. There is no big fireball. It's loud. It's dirty. It's dusty. It messes up your vision. It messes up your hearing. Your senses are discombobulated. And that's truly what it's like.
Right. Well, I think
So-
that's one of the things that, very early on in that movie that Saving Private Ryan did very well was the confusion
Mhm.
of not that I have ever stormed a beach under gunfire by any means. I don't think anybody in our generation. I mean, that's something that hasn't happened in a very long time. Not to say that people haven't stormed machine guns in our generation, but the beach storming, thousands of people being dropped off on Higgins boats in front of machine guns and cannons. That's it's a thing of the past largely. The sheer confusion, the utter, I don't know how else to explain it. It's confusion. You can't tell who's shooting at you. You can't tell where it's coming from. All you know is that basically you have one place to go, and it's either hiding behind those metal hedgehogs they were hiding behind, or make it to the beach. You have to make it up to the
cliff.
Yeah, the wall there, the beach wall there. I forget what they called it, but it was utter confusion. Ears ringing, sand in your eyes, probably blood in the water. I had heard when that movie came out, and I think it came out in 1998, that some guys that were actually serving in D-Day in World War II watched it, and it sparked memories that they had forgotten about from that day, because it felt and sounded so realistic. So even from the bullets hitting the sand, the sound of rounds impacting wet sand and bouncing off of things, they got it all right. And they did it on purpose. So great flick. But I saw this article about Dale Dye, and I'm like, every movie I've ever watched where Dale Dye was the advisor, it's a good movie.
Yeah. That's over on military.com. I read almost all of that this morning. It is a bit lengthy, but it's a transcript essentially from a podcast that he does, talking about how he got into that. He went and watched a film and just said, this is disgusting. This, it was a Vietnam era film. He served in Vietnam, saw it, and he said he almost puked in his mouth because it was so off of what the actual service is like. And he wanted to, hey, if you're going to make these films, let's do it the right way. So he made it his mission in life to go about setting some of these movie makers and putting them in their place. And hey, let's do this the right way.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. So let's get to our guest. So Gary, you're over there in East Tennessee. Have you always been in Tennessee? Is that where you're originally from?
No, I'm originally from St. Louis. So, but I spent the majority of my Army career in the Southeast, and like it. I like going back to visit St. Louis and see family, but I wouldn't want to live there. But I have kind of migrated since I retired from the Army in a couple different positions and moved up in the HR world, and currently here in East Tennessee, and really love it.
All right. Well, so when and what made you join the Army?
Oh, wow. So I went to this college, University of Missouri, St. Louis, and I majored in soccer and beer.
Good choice.
Tell us about that major. Tell us about that second one.
Living at either one of them. Yeah. So after 120 credit hours of changing my major 14 times, I still didn't have a degree. I was fortunate enough to land a salaried manager position at a McDonald's. So to a guy who may or may not have smoked copious amounts of marijuana at the time, and working at a McDonald's is probably a good combination. But I wasn't happy. I was babysitting 16-year-old employees. I liked the idea of being in charge. I did like being a team captain in soccer. And I had always thought about the Army, but I was just bottom line afraid to do it. So at the ripe young age of 26, I played softball with an Army recruiter. And I was talking about how my job sucked. And he was like, well, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I was like, it would be cool to get paid to blow stuff up. And that was the door that opened. That recruiter stuck his foot through the door and said, what if I told you you could? And I was like, I'd be all ears. I had a brand new wife. We were getting ready to have her kid. And I was looking for stability, oddly enough, in a job there I was going to blow stuff up in. Turns out I'm red green colorblind. So because I'm red green colorblind, I couldn't go EOD. Had a relatively clean background, would have been able to pass the security clearance, but red green colorblind, they said, well, you still can go into field artillery, which was great. I enjoyed it. Then I got a chance to be a recruiter. And turns out I was pretty good at it. And they said, hey, if you stay out here, we'll give you $20,000 to stay out here. I was hooked. I mean, who gets $20,000 as a staff sergeant in the Army? And I wasn't thinking about supplementary tax rates and all that stuff and how they pay it out. And I never really felt the impact. But recruiting command ended up turning me into the field that I do now. So it's funny, the intersections of life and the doors you open and you don't. But I'll be forever grateful to the Army for giving me the opportunity to not really just to get into HR, but really to grow up a little bit. And it was great 23 years. Truly enjoyed it.
How long were you a recruiter over this 23 years?
I was in recruiting command for 15 of those years.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I converted to be what they call a 79 Romeo career recruiter approximately 2 months before 9/11. And here's why. The highlight of my field artillery experience during any year was a trip out to the National Training Center. You Marines probably think 29 Palms.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. You may or may not have been out to Fort Irwin, but you fought the Krasnovians, and the Krasnovians was this fictitious, Warsaw Pact army, and they handed your ass to you every time you went out there for 14 days. But at the end, they told you how great you were, and you're the best unit that ever come through here. And I found the whole thing relatively pretentious. But I still love the Army. And I felt like when I was a recruiter, beyond the quota, beyond the number of people that we had to put in, I felt like I was an opportunity provider. So I really kind of gravitated trying to find people like myself, kind of have an idea what they want to do, but don't know how to get there. Afraid to join the Army, looking at the military, but afraid to, take that first step, fear of the unknown. And I was really enamored with the recruiting process. Well, you get promoted, and the more you get promoted, the farther away you get away from the actual recruiting process, and the more you get into taking care of your DoD civilians and soldiers. And that's what really kind of flipped the light bulb on me for human resources.
So you're telling me that the Krasnovians weren't real? Well,
they had Sheridan tanks that were made up to look like T-72s. And, of course they were real. We bought into it. But at night we could see them down in their little AOs and FOBs and everything, barbecuing and everything. And here I am eating an omelet with ham MRE. And I'm just like, I guess if that's the price they pay for living out here in this wonderful desert, I'm not going to begrudge them a little barbecue. Right. But I was really kind of done with that. And the people I met in recruiting command are just still continue to be influences today. So it was very fortunate.
I will say one of my low points of my service was spent on 29 Palms. We were out there. I don't think we gave anybody a name, but probably the Krasnovians. It was Christmas Eve. It had been, nice and warm during the day. I was standing in a fighting hole, making sure no one was attacking us in the middle of the night, and it just starts snowing. And I reached a level of cold I had never felt before in my life. It didn't matter. I had everything I possibly could over my body and was just still standing there shivering. And I had a sergeant who was down in his heated tent come over the radio singing "Let It Snow." And that broke me for a moment. I just was like, I don't want to do this no more. I don't want to play no more.
Yeah.
So I was in 29 Palms for a Steel Night exercise. Steel Night was like, I don't exactly remember what the exercise was, but I think it was in January or January, and it was cold out. So people were like, "Oh, Southern California, it's warm." I'm like, "No, all the training we did in Southern California was either in the water and the ocean's cold, and especially in the wintertime, it's not warm out there at night. Yeah. So you're always cold, you're always freezing, or you're in the desert." And they're like, "Well, it's Southern California desert, it must be warm." I'm like, it's warm in the summertime in the sun, but in the wintertime, even during the day, it's a little bit warmer during the day in the sun. But at night, you can't escape it's bone chilling. Like, it's down to the bone. And so we were always with the Amtraks and the tankers. And of course, the engineers we never had our own vehicles to sleep in. So we'd have vehicles on loan from some, motor pool, or a couple of guys would have a couple of 5 or 7 tons or whatever, but not nearly enough for a whole platoon of engineers to sleep in. So we're on the ground. And I remember asking the trackers, we're like, "Can we set up shop next to your Amtraks?" And they tell us no, because in case they started driving them or something like that, obviously we didn't want to get run over. But Yeah, for I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, man, it sucked. It was horrible. It was cold. It was just bone chilling.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
worst January I ever spent was a January at Fort Irwin. Uh, it must have been 40-mile-an-hour winds, and it was sleeting. And it wasn't snow. It was sleet, and you could feel it hit your face, and it felt like it was cutting you. So you go to bed, and you get in your sleeping bag, and you're really cold. So you got all your polypro on, but the next thing you do is sweat, and then once you sweat, and then everything gets wet in there. There's a convulsion like shivering that goes on that I can't explain. At that moment, I swore that I would never voluntarily be that cold ever again in my life. And like you say, Tim, it broke me. I had a moment. It was F this, FTA, this, and it was a bad, bad moment. And looking back on it, you kind of laugh. But when you're going through it, it's a level of suck that you're just like, well, this just doesn't suck enough, pretty rough.
I have these conversations. So like my son will come outside and he won't be properly dressed. And I find myself sometimes he's like, oh, I'm cold. I'm like, suck it up. You'll be fine. I've been through worse, and I'm like, wait. He's 10.
Yeah.
He's 10.
Yeah.
I was an adult.
Yeah. What are you going to do though? So Gary, you spent all those years recruiting. You figure out, I enjoy working with people, providing people opportunities, and it got you into HR. Yeah.
It did.
How was that transition? How was your transition from the military life into, did you leave the Army knowing that's what you wanted to do?
I left the Army knowing that I wanted to go into human resources.
Okay.
But like other business functions, you can get kind of siloed into different industries. For example, an HR manager in manufacturing isn't really looked at as a catch to be an HR manager in banking or finance or tourism or hospitality. We kind of get pigeonholed because of the KPIs to which our employees are held to. And I don't think that's true. I think a good HR leader is a good HR leader is a good HR leader, and they will adapt and learn the industry. But the biggest hurdle was trying to figure out what industry I wanted to go into. And I liked the tangible nature of manufacturing, something you can really put your hands on, and you can really, because most everything in HR is kind of touchy-feely. How do you measure morale? We have some turnover, but most of our KPIs are really kind of but manufacturing is very concrete. OEE, quality, delivery, those things are that you can actually grade your team and yourself on. So I gravitated towards that. And I just needed to get somebody to give me the opportunity. So you went from being a first sergeant for multiple companies in recruiting command back to a human resources supervisor for a small final assembly facility where we made truck axles for Peterbilt and Kenworth. But I was able to learn what I needed to learn from a basic HR standpoint in manufacturing. So I've just kind of grown from there. And I was very fortunate that Meritor, the company I worked for at the time, gave me the opportunity. In fact, Matt was one of the first sort of military transitional mentors that I kind of followed on LinkedIn as I was learning LinkedIn way back in 2015. I had went to a recruit military hiring fair in Atlanta, and Cintas had a big presence there. And I was like, well, Cintas does, those cakes that you put in a urinal, right? I didn't know what they did. And then I learned about the company, and then I saw him, and he's a military liaison for a company that's really into a lot of different things, to which I was so impacted that they're a stalwart partner of mine now where I'm at. I consider them true business partners in taking care of my employees. But I kind of linked up with him and just kind of followed some advice from him and others that were out there, and just really got fortunate to get a position. And I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to go, and I'm going to cut my teeth, and I'll go from there. And it's really been a great career so far. I really love manufacturing and distribution operations. I do. And the people that do it amaze me every day.
Well, how has HR been this past year now with the COVID? We kind of talked a little bit beforehand, but I know personally, my local HR representative, I've thought about it in the past, just calling her to just say, hey, listen, I don't have any bad news. I'm not calling because I've been in close contact. I just want to let you know, I feel for you. You're doing an awesome job. Keep it up.
Just calling to say hi.
Yeah, just
how are you doing?
Yeah.
Well,
Do you need to talk?
That's huge, Tim, because most people come to us like this, right? They come to me.
Yes.
And that's okay, because without them, there is no me. But you doing that probably made that person's week. And it's not hyperbole. That's real. It's been a challenge. But I will tell you something about the military, and when the SHEIT hits the fan, like COVID, you just do it. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds hokey and it sounds a little corny, but you just do it. And you adjust, because what I did last February and March is completely different than what I'm doing now. But I had to do something. Since we were a critical infrastructure business, I had to show my team that, hey, I'm in front of this, even though I wasn't. I had a quick reaction card for quick sanitation. I got ahead of the supply curve for masks and N95 masks and hand sanitizer. Remember all that stuff you couldn't get when this stuff first kicked off, besides toilet paper. You couldn't get that either. But just to show them that you're in it with them. Corporate people are working from home, and that's great. If you had the opportunity to work from home and work remotely, God love you, do it. But if my team was here, I was going to be here. Again, that military mentality. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think anything of it. It's just what you do. And as a first sergeant, you're, beans and bullets, beans and bullets, beans and bullets. So my beans and bullets now was making sure that I was getting my team all the PPE and all the training and all the support they needed. And even if they just needed to come to the office and say, Gary, I'm scared, and I would, you got to empathize with them. You're like, yeah, I get it. And I'd always give them, well, when I got the anthrax series, I was scared too. Or I understand, I've worked with a lot of people that have been in scary situations, but this too will end. And here we are still waiting for it to end a year later, or the better part of a year later. So it's been challenging. Contact tracing, supporting the employees. Fortunately for us at Ball Metal Pack, our senior leadership has just like, I don't care what it costs to take care of our people, take care of our people.
You have to.
You don't understand from my standpoint, you probably do, but from my standpoint, that is so awesome. They didn't say get masks, but price them out, get PPE, but look at the low cost leader,
Right.
While we're trying to make Lysol cans, literally Lysol cans in the middle of a pandemic for our customers. And we're trying to be the low cost leader in packaging. They didn't put that constraint on me. They said, Gary, go get it done. And if you need something, raise your hand. And that's as much support as you could ever ask from leadership. And
well,
been impressed.
You made a point. You said something before, Gary, and that was that you didn't really have an option. You just get it done. And that's the military mentality. And this is something that I tell hiring managers all the time and businesses in general, that when you're recruiting from the armed forces, when you're getting somebody from the military, and not everybody from the military is going to be a rock star at what they do. I mean, it's a cross section of the whole society. Not everybody in society is a rock star at what they do, but you do get from a lot of them, you do get people who have a very unique sense of duty, have a very unique maybe background of training and experience, and the statement you made, you just had to do it. It just has to get done. Take that in combat, take that in an operation, a military operation, a logistical operation, take that in whatever we faced in the armed forces, and apply that to business. In the military, you don't get the option of saying, you know what, like, hey, there's this enemy coming across the border today, and they're engaging our troops, here at this checkpoint. Let's just sit this one out. There's no option to do it. Like, you have to do it. It doesn't matter if it is cold outside. It doesn't matter if it's raining. It doesn't matter if you don't have any bullets. It doesn't matter if, you name it across the board. I know in the Marine Corps, and probably similar in the Army too, but I can only speak from my own experience. We would learn how to fight. If you ran out of ammo, then you're fixing bayonets. And then if you ran out of bayonets, then you're doing MCMAP, the Marine Corps martial arts. You're fighting hand to hand. And you're getting through that continuum of force. maybe that's not the best use of the phrase continuum of force, but you're getting through that continuum of force where if you run out of this, you have to use that. You just have to get it done. There's no option. And I think that is if I had to summarize what a military person brings to what a veteran brings to the business, to any business, that's one of probably the three pillars, is that the job will just get done. We talked about commander's intent on our last podcast with Todd Mayer. Commander's intent is something that myself and my counterpart use a lot. We talk about, like, what's the overall goal here that our CEO, that our executives want us to get done. And that is the mission that I'm carrying out. I don't need them to guide me there. I just need them to say, we're going to set the standard. Here's why we're paying you. Go get the job done. Right. Go get the job done. And they trust that's what's happening. And I think that, in and of itself, like when you talk about when you were coming out of the military and you were looking for guidance on how to get where you're going, you said you're going to cut your teeth, get planted in a place, and just grow from there. Some of the best advice I've ever heard or even passed along to other people is, you're not going to find, it's not this job you want. It's what comes after this, but you have to get in the door first and prove where you're going. You have to prove your worth, because you are competing with 100 or 1,000 other people who also look really good on paper too. So that's Armed Forces 101. That's hiring a veteran 101 is you get a person, among other things, you get a person who has this vast experience that, give them the commander's intent, tell them what you'd like them, why you're paying them, and they'll just get it done. You don't need to tell them, you don't need to hold their hand.
No. And what's really kind of neat is you can take from, as a veteran, especially if you've been in for a career or you've held some leadership positions, whether they're formal or informal by title, or you were just somebody that people looked up to and people gravitated towards you. If you bring that ability out into manufacturing, because I know it, you stand out. You're not afraid to say, hey, give me the ball, I'll run with it. And people naturally gravitate towards you. I still have the employees, man, did you ever kill anybody? No, I haven't. I wanted to, but I didn't. But I'll never be afraid to say, hey, give me the ball. When my plant manager's not here, whether they're on PTO or whatever, I run the plant. I step up and, hey, it's mine. I don't know the first thing about running a plant, but I'll figure it out, because all this stuff is teachable. It's learnable. We bring, through experience and exposure from the military, the ability to stand up and say, okay, it's my baby, even though it's maybe not mine. But we do that. And to see my veterans that are here, most of them, and as you said, Matt, it's a cross section, but most of them, you could tell by the way they carry themselves. You could tell by the way they own their processes and own their teams that they come from the military. They're nowhere high and tights like me or anything like that anymore, but you can tell that something's been ingrained into them. Mm-hmm. And it's really neat to see.
Gary, how's your military service helped you in your field of work? What skills did you take from the military that you now use on a pretty regular basis?
Definitely in recruiting command, you had again, to use Matt's term, a cross section of soldiers that were either volunteered or voluntold to go into recruiting. Learning how to deal with the different personalities. The biggest thing that I took from the military, other than the skills we've already talked about, is how to engage with my team. Because HR can be very, very transactional. Hey, I need this pay raise done. Hey, I need my address changed. Hey, I need to do a new direct deposit. All that stuff's HR-ish, transactional stuff. Mm-hmm. I've never lost the desire or drive to engage with my team, because in the business world, and especially in manufacturing, the more your team sees that you care about them, not just their processes or their output, but that you care about them, the more they will move mountains for you. Same thing was in the Army. If I had guys that were voluntold to be recruiters, if I showed them that I cared, because I did, because I knew recruiting was tough. It's not easy sitting in somebody's living room and telling mom and dad, hey, your son's not going to die at war. You can't say that. You don't know that. But convincing them that they're joining the best team in the world, and that gives them the best chance to come back from combat, because their son wants to be a Ranger in the Army. being able to be there for them and not hold their hand, but give them words of encouragement. And this is how it's going to help your career. Your interpersonal skills are going to improve. You're going to be able to engage with your soldiers better as you move up the ranks. That's the biggest thing that I took from the military, because I was an introvert. I would talk to my squad, I would talk to my crew, but beyond that, I wasn't talking to anybody. Recruiting command beat that out of me. So I will talk to everybody now, even if I don't know them. And people are around that are just like, man, you'll talk to anybody. I was like, man, you never know who you're going to run into.
Man, recruiters in the military. And when I talked to, we had Rob Arndt on here on the podcast a few weeks ago. Rob Arndt was a recruiter in the Marine Corps, and he would tell us the stories of how ruthless they were. So two things that I always say, if we're hiring recruiters into a company and you get an ex-military recruiter, that person's ruthless. That person will walk around the shopping mall and find the right person for the job if they have to. Now, that's not how we do corporate recruiting, right? But there are companies, there are local production companies that have, you said you're in manufacturing, Gary. There are production companies nearby, one of which you mentioned before, where I used to work, who are constantly hiring people. And having a military recruiter, an ex-military recruiter in the door at the mall canvassing people would probably actually solve a lot of the issues that they have in staffing. Yeah. Because a lot of these jobs are either hourly, or they are production jobs, or they are, I see on Facebook in my local neighborhood groups all the time, people are saying, hey, who's hiring? I need $15 an hour. And I'm like, everybody's hiring. Yes. Everybody is hiring. Right. And especially if you're looking for $10 an hour, $12 an hour, like there are a million of them. You need to go find them. And that's the job seeker's fault partially. But the companies are not doing a very good job of putting themselves out there and letting people know, like, hey, you can come here and turn widgets all day and we'll pay you $12 an hour. So companies could benefit from that ruthlessness in their in the military recruiter. The other thing is for sales jobs. Military recruiters are great salespeople. Recruiting is in and of itself, in an indirect way, it is sales. You're finding candidates, you're finding people, and those are essentially your potential customers. You're finding that customer, and then you're selling them on an opportunity. In a lot of cases, especially when you get up the ranks and like executive recruiting, you're convincing somebody to leave one job in which they're comfortable to come to another one. Yes, there's money involved. I always thought going into recruiting earlier in my career, I'm like, this would be the easiest job in the world. If I offer you more money, you'll jump. Not true. Not necessarily true at all. Sometimes they won't even answer the phone. Right. And so ex-military recruiters, and I'm careful to say ex-military, people who have recruited in the military, are the most ruthless salespeople and recruiters that you could hire. And I say ruthless in a good way. These are people that will get the job done no matter what. Back to that whole thing. Just tell me what I need to accomplish and I'll go get it done.
Yeah. And I will tell you, and again, I'm not saying this because we're on the show together, but I was always most successful when I would partner with my local Marine Corps recruiters. And here's why. There would be people that they could take into their branch depending on service requirements that I couldn't, and vice versa.
Right.
So literally, once everybody in our recruiting zone knew who we were, it was like trading baseball cards. And I know that sounds horrible, but it's true. And
we people looking for opportunities,
or young lady opportunities to start a career.
Right.
And the best thing I liked about the Marine Corps is what they sold was becoming a Marine. There was not jobs, there was not signing bonuses, there was none of that. It was just about becoming a Marine. And I always had that respect for them because of that. Because I had to look at high density MOSs and talk, junior into becoming a forward observer because we needed forward observers at the time, whatever the case may be. So we were trying to fill accession gaps, whereas Marines were just trying to find Marines.
Right.
And I think that simplifies it, and it reinforced their brand.
Well, to your point about trading baseball cards, we do the same thing in corporate America in recruiting. If I have a really good candidate and I don't have a job for them, I'll try to pass them along to other companies. I do it all the time. I would say our partnerships are probably not as good as they can be because we are ultimately, again, I'm paid to produce for my company and not to produce for the other three companies in the same market. But at the end of the day, it's a tactic. I mean, my number one priority is bringing the best talent into my company, and then my secondary priority is making sure that the person transitioning out of the military knows where their opportunities are, because it's part of my job, but I think secondarily it's part of my personal passion. So it can fulfill both, but we trade resumes all the time.
Absolutely.
Matt, I think I saw a light bulb go off over your head when we were kind of talking about, that military recruiter that hangs out at the mall. If you're in the Cincinnati area, look at the local food courts. The Hot Topic, Matt will probably be in that area, looking to recruit some people going forward.
I'm looking for building engineers. Hopefully, I'm going to find some building engineers with extensive HVAC experience hanging out there next to the sizzling wok.
There you go. Yeah. There you go.
You never know, though. Actually, you don't ever know, because you
like Gary said earlier, start that conversation, because you never know who you're going into.
This is going to sound silly, but I carry my business card around with me sometimes, and I will bump into somebody who is wearing a military shirt. I'll say, "Hey, Semper Fi," if it's a Marine, Semper Fi, or "Hey, I see you're wearing the USS JFK hat. My dad served on that ship," or whatever. Start a conversation. You might just find I've hired people that way. I have in previous positions. It's rare, it's few and far between, but it happens. You just never know who you're going to spark up a conversation with. But you have to have that mentality of what Gary said. Open the door. Be willing to talk to anybody. You never know. I used to be a bartender right when I got out of the military, and I can't tell you how many opportunities fell on my plate because I talked to the guy that I'm serving a beer to, and he's like, "Well, I'm the CEO of company down the street. I'm looking for somebody to run the phones," and not that I wanted to do that kind of work, but opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big point of this conversation we've had today is that, the leadership intent, just show us the finish line as military personnel and veterans go. Just show us the finish line and give us the tools to get there, and kind of just let us go to work. We'll get you to that finish line. Sometimes it's going to work flawlessly and it's going to be beautiful. And sometimes it's going to be a little dirty and gritty and nasty, but guess what? We're always going to get to that finish line. So people out there looking to hire veterans and people transitioning out of the military, just know you're getting people that will complete their task and complete their jobs and complete the mission. It's not always going to be the prettiest thing you've ever seen, but the job's going to get done at the end of the day. So Gary, what would you say as an HR representative? What's your biggest struggle, on a day-to-day basis?
The balance of tactical and strategic human resources. And by what I mean is the minutia that needs to get done, tactically speaking, in human resources versus the strategic initiatives that I need to be doing with the team to improve the culture, to improve employee engagement, to improve communication, to really kind of hone training and build a true talent succession from within versus having to go outside of the organization. Because oddly enough, if you would have told me 2 years ago it was this hard to make a can, I would have laughed at you. But there's a lot of engineering that goes into a can. And can makers, unfortunately, outside my window, there's not a tree where I can go pluck a line mechanic. They don't grow on trees. So you have to get really strategic on where do you find these potential super technicians, and how do you groom them and how do you grow them? So the biggest challenge is continually filling the critical needs for your organization while being an advocate for your employees as well. You're pulled in two directions. Again, I reflected my time as a first sergeant. My loyalty was to my command and to my team. And here I am in the middle. It's a lonely place. And that's okay. I signed up for it. And I kind of enjoy the challenge because I have to make sure that I am taking care of the organization legally, morally, and ethically in everything we do. That's my number one priority. Stay away from the 6, 7, 8-figure lawsuits. Those aren't good. Those will close a medium-sized company. So I have to be vigilant about that. By the same time, again, we talked about filling these gaps on the line so we continue to keep the lights on and make money for the organization. And you do that with great talent. They don't necessarily have to know how to do it. We'll teach them. But finding the balance of time and doing all that in a day is really, really difficult. I started out when in HR, I was like, 8-hour day, this is easy. And I found out, well, Mondays is a 12-hour day because you got payroll. Tuesdays is, you're rectifying any payroll issues that didn't get fixed. And there's a cadence and there's a rhythm to it. But at the same time, none of those strategic initiatives, whether it's talent succession, talent acquisition, performance management, training, none of those initiatives go away. So you can't really just shelve those until Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday either. You have to be able to prioritize them continually throughout the day. And I don't think that's unique to HR. Every business function has that. But the ability to properly prioritize them and make sure that you're impacting the organization as most positively as you can is the most important thing we do.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's going to get us wrapped up here. So, Gary, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to meet you. Great to talk to you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for what you're doing for your service for your people now. HR is not necessarily, that frontline worker. They're not the person you're going to be rubbing elbows with on a daily basis. They're, to put it in military terms, they're kind of like that chaplain. They're there. And when you need them, you hope you don't need them. But when you need them, they're there, they're the rock that you can lean on. They're the one there to support you and help you and get you through whatever the issue is. So you're a vital piece to the corporate sector. So thank you very much for everything you do. Matt, you got anything before we get out of here this week?
Yeah, Gary, I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate your service as well. I know you and I have been connected for quite some time, and always appreciate your kind words on LinkedIn and your engagement. I think that there's a lot of noise in the space. There's a lot of noise around the military transition, but there are a handful of voices that kind of rise to the top. And I think those of us who truly have that transition in mind and we're trying to help others, that's our personal and professional mission. So I appreciate that out of you too. Keep up the great work, and we'll look forward to having you again on here sometime soon. We'll stay connected.
Thanks you both. I appreciate it, and thanks for letting me tell my story. Really proud of where I came from and what the Army's done for me and what I'm doing now. So thanks again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Keep those people safe down there in East Tennessee. You can check us out on all the major social media accounts. You can find us on all major podcast platforms. Give us a like, subscribe, give us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We appreciate that very much. To everybody in the live chat there on Facebook, we appreciate the comments. I know Matt earlier said something about accidentally hurting someone. Someone did pose a question to you.
These guys were fighting in a bar, and I broke up the fight, and I accidentally pushed one of the guys over. I may have pushed him not so gently, and he hurt himself. But he already ran into me and kept trying to fight with me. So I was like, whatever.
Matt did what he had to do in the moment.
It was from Mitchell Glover. Accidentally hurt someone. Dish. You know it, Mitchell.
So thank you guys for everybody there in the live chat that interacts with us. We appreciate that very much. So until next week, we'll be right here on the Beyond the Wire podcast.